Microsoft Azure Fundamentals Study Guide. This is episode 22 of 50, Azure Advisor. My name's Tim Werner. Welcome. We're working our way through the AZ-900 objective domain. We start with the functional group Describe Core Solutions in Azure Management Tools, come down through Describe Azure Management Tools, and specifically today we're describing the functionality and usage of Azure Advisor. If you go to timw.info/AZ900, you can download an Excel workbook that contains the full blueprint for exam AZ900, and thanks to an excellent suggestion I received from a viewer, I've now hyperlinked all of the videos so that you can work from the workbook and click right out to where the video lives on YouTube. What is Azure Advisor and why should you care? Well, Azure Advisor is a free product, first of all. You can't beat the price. What it does is gives you personalized guidance as to Microsoft Azure best practices. Azure Advisor is always running. You can't turn it off. And as I said, there's no cost involved. So in my consulting practice, I always want to make sure that my customers are regularly checking Advisor to see if there are any good recommendations. What kind of recommendations does Advisor offer? Well, there's 5 recommendation categories. There's high availability. We learned about that earlier in this course, didn't we? Security, performance, cost, and operational excellence. I think the first 4 are pretty self-explanatory if you've been following this study guide sequentially, but you might be wondering more about what operational excellence is. Well, Microsoft has historically been a dog-fooding company. Dog-fooding is a term used in software development where a business uses the software that they make themselves. They use Azure themselves, and Microsoft has a whole bunch of full-time cloud solution architects, and they have, in working with their customers over the years, developed guidance on what they think are best proven practices with Microsoft Azure. That's what operational excellence is. Now let me say before we hop into the demo that although Azure Advisor is a free service, the recommendations that you get are also free, but if you take advantage of any of those recommendations, you could very well be making configuration changes in your subscription that do cost money. I just wanted to be explicit about that. In terms of role-based access control permissions, you can get into Azure Advisor and look at everything with Reader, but you'll want to have a higher level of privilege, particularly something like contributor or subscription owner or owner for whatever scope you're in, resource group, subscription, whatever, in order to take some of these recommendations and actually act on them. Now, let's get into that demo, and let me show you how Azure Advisor works. Here we are in the Azure Portal, and I'm going to come up into Global Search and search for Advisor. Let's take a look at Azure Advisor. I don't know what kind of recommendations it's going to give me because it's been a little while since I've been in here. Once again, to repeat, this is a free service in which Advisor is constantly scanning your usage and your configuration. And what's cool about this, the value proposition for a business owner, or a subscription owner, I should say, is that Azure can give you advice that could have tangible impact on, as you can see, cost, security, high availability, operational excellence, and performance. And you can cut down on what Advisor's looking at by opening this All Types dropdown, and you can also postpone recommendations to have Advisor settle down and not alert you about particular recommendations for a period of time. You can see over here in the left-hand settings, you can look at the recommendations in whole or in part, and then there's a bit where you can raise alerts based on Advisor events. Honestly, this timw.info subscription's been pretty quiet lately, so I don't expect to see much. I'm surprised that we have 3 recommendations here for security with 2 impacted resources. Let's click in there and take a look. As you can see, you get an assessment in terms of what Microsoft considers high, medium, or low impact. And also, there's a bit of an advertisement here, this banner that says your security experience may be limited. What's going on under the hood here is that the security recommendations in Azure Advisor are tied to another service called Azure Security Center. And whereas Azure Advisor is always free, Azure Security Center does run at a more basic free tier or a full, robust paid tier. I think that's what this banner is trying to tell us. But as you can see here, we've got some recommendations here. MFA, which is multi-factor authentication, should be enabled on accounts with owner permissions on your subscription. Well, that sounds kind of scary. Let me click into that suggestion, and we can read more details, including links out to the documentation of what's going on. Another tangible benefit of Azure Advisor is that it can help businesses whose IT staff isn't yet fully skilled up on Azure. There's a fear, and I think it's a reasonable fear for some businesses going into Azure. I don't know what I don't know. Azure can really help you in terms of getting on board with best practice suggestions and making sure you don't have anything glaringly unsecure, for example. So this is telling us here, if we scroll down a little bit, our affected resources, and you'll notice that there's remediation steps here as well. So basically what we would do here to remediate, the steps here for remediation are manual. You'll find that some remediation steps in Azure Advisor are automatic, where Advisor can actually do the work for you. Others like this are complex enough to where you'll have to do it yourself, but notice that we have step-by-step instructions. So what I would do here, and what I will do actually after this recording stops, I'm going to come down under Affected Resources. It looks like I need to go into my sponsorship subscription and run a report on all accounts who have owner permissions, and I'm going to want to enable multi-factor or second-factor authentication for those accounts, such that if the password is breached, at least there's a second factor there backing it up. Does that make sense? Let's come back a step and actually let's take a look at another suggestion, high availability. It looks like there's 3 medium impact recommendations here. Looks like this first one says, enable virtual machine backup to protect your data from corruption and accidental deletion. Let's click into there. And I should have mentioned this a moment ago, but you can generate reports at every level in Azure Advisor. See how the toolbar has these buttons to download the current view as a comma-separated value, CSV, or an Adobe Acrobat portable document format, PDF file. These buttons here would just download this particular recommendation, but you can also generate these file reports on everything at once to share with your boss and colleagues. And then the ability to raise an alert is going to help businesses that maybe don't think very often of coming into Advisor. You can create an alert that will fire off when a particular recommendation happens. Very powerful the way that you can link these products together in Microsoft Azure. If I scroll down here, here's a good example of where you can have Azure Advisor help you remediate a recommendation. We've got server 1 that's not being backed up right now. And notice that we can action postpone or dismiss. Dismiss means, all right, fine, whatever you're suggesting is fine, noted, but I don't want to see it in my recommendations anymore. Postpone is, I don't want to see it for now, but bring it back in the future. Lastly, recommended actions, enable virtual machine backup. Look here, Azure Advisor's taken us to the exact blade we need to configure Azure Backup for this virtual machine. Really neat. For learning resources, I've got a couple of links in the Azure documentation that are of relevance and interest, I hope. Azure Advisor Introductions at timw.info/AAV1, and a tutorial, step-by-step Azure Advisor tutorial, can be found at timw.info/AAV2. Alrighty then, there's another episode down. We're trucking on through. Thank you so much for joining me. Any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to leave them right here on YouTube. I get an email notification every time someone comments. You can also follow me at Twitter, Tech Trainer Tim. All of my Pluralsight courses are at timw.info/PS, and my website is techtrainertim.com. Happy studying, and thanks again.